This KFAN podcast is sponsored by Builders and Remodelers, exclusive Twin Cities provider of Elements Windows. Get the highest quality windows at unmatchable value. Visit buildersandremodelers.com for more details.
Looking for excitement? Chumba Casino is here. Play anytime, play anywhere. Play on the train, play at the store, play at home, play when you're bored. Play today for your chance to win and get daily bonuses when you log in. So what are you waiting for? Don't delay. Chumba Casino is free to play.
Experience social gameplay like never before. Go to Chumba Casino right now to play hundreds of games, including online slots, bingo, Slingo, and more. Live the Chumba life at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Navy Federal Credit Union. Navy Federal can help you find and finance the right vehicle with ease. With Navy Federal's car buying service powered by TrueCar, you can find the vehicle that's right for you as you search through inventory and compare models. And you can get an amazing rate when you finance with Navy Federal. Visit NavyFederal.org/TrueCar to learn more. Navy Federal is insured by NCUA, credit and collateral subject to approval. Visit NavyFederal.org/TrueCar to learn more.
Wasabi Technologies is purpose-built to free businesses from skyrocketing storage costs and unpredictable egress fees from those old and top-heavy legacy providers. You know, the big guys. Wasabi is the go-to provider for professional and collegiate sports teams around the world. From Wasabi's AI-enabled intelligent media storage, Wasabi Air, to the industry's only cloud storage service with triple protection against cyber criminals, Wasabi is driving innovation in data storage. All for up to 80% less than those other guys. Try them out for free at wasabi.com.
Mini top 5 at 5 here. Twins back in action tonight, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Texas.
The Rangers are, and it's here. Good weather for baseball tonight, wouldn't you think?
Beautiful day.
Gorgeous night.
It's always a beautiful night at Target Field.
Very, very true, David.
And Simeon Woods-Richardson makes his return to the bump.
Out of necessity, we've got some holes to fill in our rotation, as we well know. And Game 3, the NBA Finals, I don't think till tomorrow night. Long delay.
Correct.
Game 3 Stanley Cup Finals was last night and was a blowout in favor of the home team. Was the final 6-1? Although
I think that's what
we
it
have
was.
been warned that there was a purpose to all the late violence in the third period by the losers.
So what happens if Florida wins the next game?
It would be delicious based on the text we've received.
Because the whole theory is, well, they were trying to set the table for the next game. And the texter that said they're going to be thinking about it every time they go over the middle, or not even. Anytime they're just skating anywhere, because that's what it was last night.
Which also kind of suggests that these players haven't played hockey before their whole lives. You know, like they're just going to curl up and, I mean, they're a great franchise. And their numbers this season kind of speak for themselves.
Defending
that doesn't
champs.
mean Edmonton can't come back in the series. Edmonton's good, fan has learned. Although Connor McDavid, not much of a factor in game number 3. Can that continue? Is that realistic? I don't know.
By the way, before last night's debacle with Edmonton.
Yes.
And I know this has happened before, but it just hit me, whatever night that would have been. Was it Friday night or maybe Thursday night? Having Wayne Gretzky, and this is after McDavid had that ridiculous dangle around three guys and then had the beautiful pass.
Which, by the way, I celebrated by retweeting a celebratory tweet from another basketball person. That's how against good hockey or paying attention to good hockey I am. It's so bizarre.
And with me as, what would I be if you're the ambassador? I guess the ambassador's assistant or something, chief of staff.
Yeah.
Having Wayne Gretzky in Edmonton, where we know what he means to that franchise. They have the Club 99 there. That's literally just an homage to him.
Correct.
Like a club level there. It's amazing. Having Wayne in Edmonton talking about Connor McDavid is like the greatest thing ever, right? If you're a sports fan.
No doubt.
And to have the panel basically go, well, Wayne, you're the only one up here that has any idea of what he just did and what he's been doing.
Yes.
What's he feeling like? It's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
It's so cool. And last night, it was obviously the exact opposite. Hotline.
There's your hotline, as we are indeed expecting a phone call. That's why it's a mini version of the top five at 5. A lot of coverage, obviously, on what's been taking place, mainly California, but elsewhere as well. And we thought we'd get caught up with a new guest to the program who could perhaps give us some insight, because he's been kind of reporting on this story and anchoring on this particular story for quite some time. And Guardsy's chatting with him now. We'll get that going. His name is Connell McShane, and he anchors. We've talked from time to time on this show about News Nation and the hope that that entity could develop into, find a place in the national/international media sphere, so to speak, for all the obvious reasons. And Connell anchors a program called News Nation Now, which is a 3-hour-long weekday news program. Basically runs much of it during our show. He's on from 2 to 5 o'clock Central Time. The program debuted in September of 2023 on News Nation. It's worth noting, because when we bring a new guest in, we like to kind of set up his bona fides and a little bit of background. If you're not familiar with the name, many of you might be, because Mr. McShane was the anchor chief national correspondent for Fox Business Network for quite some time, daytime and primetime programming, and even with great distinguished work there, also was a reporter at Bloomberg Radio and Television for a significant amount of time as well. He's kind enough to join us via the Connecticut Water Systems Hotline. Although, Connell, as we say hello, my producer, Justin, who you're just listening to, did note on your bio, we're not just a sports show, which is part of the reason we want to have you on, but there is your roots are in sports broadcasting, as it turns out, correct?
WBRK in Pittsfield, Massachusetts was my first job, doing play-by-play for the Pittsfield Mets on the radio, which was then the Class A short-season affiliate of the New York Mets, the team that moved to Brooklyn. Great job. Didn't get paid $1 for the job, but probably my best favorite job.
I bet you probably have, everybody who's worked in the minors has some pretty good minor league stories. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I got caught under the tarp once. Did play-by-play of a wedding one time in the middle of the game because we didn't have any commercials left. A couple got married at second base. There was another field where they set the field on fire to get rid of the puddles because it was raining. So, yeah, it was good. That was only 1 year, but it was crazy. That. It was so much fun. That's
outstanding, and a great start to where you've obviously branched out well past what we like to call the toy department on this show. So you just got off the air. Give me, in the last 3 hours, I know you're heavily covering the immigration issue and the situation in California. Give me, from your standpoint, based on the reporters you had on, the interviews that you did, including, I think, with some political leaders out of California, what stands out to you as we try to advance or update people on that particular story?
Well, still relatively early in the day today, so it's always tough to make a judgment because these protests continue and usually escalate later in afternoons, evenings, and overnights as they did last night. I would say it's been relatively calm. We had a live moment about a half an hour ago or so, though. It's interesting. The police now in L.A. seem to have, I don't know if it's a different strategy, but it might be a slightly more aggressive approach where, the other day the protesters went on the 101 freeway and kind of, stopped traffic. Today they're blocking them from doing that. They're dispersing earlier. We saw them pushing them back from where the federal building is, where they've been protesting at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon Pacific time. Seems earlier than other days. They moved. There was a whole group of protesters. We were watching this live because the chopper had a shot up, and one guy must have done something to get out of hand. We didn't see exactly what prompted this, but they moved in. A blitzing outside linebacker and took him down real quick, put him in cuffs, took him to the side of the street, and didn't do anything with the other protesters. So, in other words, it seemed like they were looking to remove agitators. It just struck me as like a little bit of a different approach, I would say, than the last few days. Taking it to the protesters rather than reacting. And, we'll see if that's more effective, as the night goes on. In terms of what's the latest that you understand regarding the Marine deployment, in terms of whether they're actually being used or about to be deployed or simply on standby? So I've seen multiple kind of conflicting reports on that. I'll go with what I'll say is like our own correspondents. Like we have Nancy Lewis, a terrific reporter, guy Alex Capriello, who is as well. They were both on our show. Neither one of them has seen the Marines in downtown LA. There's been other reports that they were down near Paramount, there was protests the other day near Compton. We didn't have anyone there this afternoon, so I can't confirm that. Where Alex was standing right in front of National Guard troops who have already been deployed. So our understanding is the 700 Marines moving in from 29 Palms or either there or about to be there. But our crew there in downtown LA hasn't seen any members of the Marines yet.
One of the challenges, I'm sure, in your job is how to best or most accurately characterize the trouble or the violence to the degree that there has been. Los Angeles, I don't have to tell you, is a massive area. And so there are many, many places where they might not have any idea that anything is going on at all. So can you speak to how many is it a half a dozen pockets when it comes to whatever disturbances and standoffs have taken place? Is it 3? Is it 20? What kind of sense can you give us about how widespread, at least to this point, it has been?
Well, it's funny you bring that up because we did a segment today. We have like a map, and I have a little tablet computer where you can kind of draw on the map, telestrator style like they do in sports. So I did, in the first hour of our show, a little brief overview of that, and was just showing, to your point, how sprawling of a city Los Angeles is, or a county of Los Angeles is. Even the city itself is big, but Los Angeles County goes all the way out, and we were just showing, down up the Beverly Hills and down the coast in Santa Monica and Long Beach and what have you. And the protests themselves are in a relatively small area, with the exception of Paramount, where those protests were, again, right just east of Compton, which is still a relatively contained area there south of downtown Los Angeles. Most of them have been in the downtown area near the federal buildings, right off the 101 freeway. It's last night I was watching some of the coverage, and the protesters moved just a matter of maybe 3 or 4 city blocks. You would think from watching that they had taken over a big part of the city, right. But it was really a relatively small part of the city. So yeah, if you're out in the outskirts of Los Angeles, and you're not paying attention to the news, of course, and have no reason to go downtown, I'm sure you're going you're going about your day the way you normally would. So it's like I always say in these situations, multiple things can be true at once. So there's been terrible violence. There was some looting last night. We saw that. We reported it. We had the video. And at the same time, when the mayor comes out and says this is in an isolated, relatively small area, she's also telling the truth. So all of those things can be true at once, especially in a big city. I've covered protests certainly in California. I remember covering a big one in San Francisco years back when Trump was first coming in, and a number of them here in New York. And that happens all the time here in New York when we'll have a protest somewhere and someone else is, having a coffee and has no idea on the other side of town, because these cities are big, and Los Angeles even more so because it's so spread out. So yeah. I think that's true.
We're chatting with Connell McShane, who anchors News Nation Now, a 3-hour weekday news program from 2 to 5 Central Time. Can you update us? I don't know how much time you devoted to this today on your show, about where we are regarding the standoff and the verbal war of words, and even now, to an extent, I guess, on the legal side of it, between the president and the governor of the state of California.
Yeah, it is legal now. The lawsuits have been filed. The governor has filed a lawsuit to try to stop the deployment of the National Guard, and I believe the Marines as well. There's going to be a hearing, I believe, on Thursday was the last that I saw about that. They wanted to have an emergency injunction where they would stop them right away, and the judge on the case, who was actually Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer's brother, believe it or not, which is kind of a random fact, he came out and said, no, we're going to have a hearing Thursday. So that'll work its way through the courts. There's plenty of politics to go around on both sides here. We're going back to the earlier point where multiple things can be true at once. Yeah. I mean, and then sometimes you work in stuff that's not true. Like, for example, the president came out, he had a speech in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, that we carried live today, and he's been talking a lot about Minnesota for the last couple of days, right? And he said a couple of things. One thing in particular in the speech where he's making a larger point that's to his political advantage, but the facts are just not right. He's not telling the truth. So in other words, he said repeatedly that the Minnesota governor in 2020 during the George Floyd protests refused to deploy the National Guard, so he had to do it, meaning Trump.
Right.
And that's not true. Governor Walz did issue the executive order. We even have the exact date. It was May 28th of 2020 deploying the Guard. Trump had urged him to. Some had, criticized him for taking too long. But Trump at the time, funny enough, actually praised him. Said Walz was doing a great job, and he moved really, really fast. So that's the kind of thing we're seeing politically. And now you got Newsom versus Trump. So everybody's trying to make their points, and we try to stick to the facts as much as we can. And those were ones where the facts were kind of not lining up exactly with the story.
It is interesting how much that story even changed here, because it is, I think, very fair to say that the Guard was called in late, and the debate here was because the battle between the mayor's people and the governor's people. No. The governor was ready, and the mayor didn't give the proper notification. That's been an ongoing battle. So I think there definitely was room there, but it is ironic, as you say, because at the time the president had actually spoken much more glowingly in that regard.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a more specific question as it pertains to the National Guard. Leave the Marines out for this moment. The National Guard part of the story, because at our level, a much smaller level than you on a national level, part of what we often see is that for every Trump reaction, there's going to be a reaction simply because Trump is the guy doing the action. So when it comes to the question of whether there was a need for National Guard support to perhaps fend off the bad eventuality when they did come in too late to prevent a number of some horrific violent moments here in Minneapolis, there's that question, I guess, of whether the reason Newsom doesn't want them isn't because he really couldn't use them, but because Trump's pushing for it, and I can't go along with anything the president has to say. Do you have any sense from you or your reporters on that particular ticklish issue?
Not really. I mean, the reason I say not really is because that's a really hard one to get to the bottom of. You have to make an assumption on either side. And if you're on Governor Newsom's side politically, you're probably going to almost reflexively take the stand. And we've had many guests that have said as much, that say, well, the president's going way too far here. And if you're on the president's side politically, it's just as easy to say the opposite and assume that, or accuse. And again, this is why it's tough to have an answer on this, because you're going to have to make an accusation that you can't necessarily prove, that the mayor or the governor just purposely didn't do enough, almost trying to dare the president into this maneuver so they could criticize him for it, right? You know what I'm saying? So it's a tough thing to get to the bottom of. We're so dug in politically now in this country that I could see people kind of making rational or reasonable arguments on both sides of that, but it's just going to be a tough one to prove, and both sides are just going to dig in because it suits their political needs to do so. This is actually a pretty good political argument in some ways. I think that, as John Fetterman, the senator from Pennsylvania, pointed out, and in other ways it's not great for the Democrats, broadly speaking, but just Trump versus Newsom, if you're Newsom and you want to run for president, you've set yourself up to kind of have this boogeyman and this argument to make. Whereas Trump, when last week you're talking about your feud with Elon Musk, you're now having a conversation that you're more comfortable having, and that's one about immigration. So I think both sides have incentives to make these arguments, and it's tough for us to really get to the bottom unless someone were to leak something or let something slip as to what the true motivations are.
I'm wondering if you spent any time on or have anything to report on, or your reporters have gotten into this. Wall Street Journal has a pretty thoroughly researched story. I think it's a 4 byline story that's getting some attention. I think it posted last night, but it attempted to lay out in at least these reporters' minds sort of what the White House marching orders were that kind of sparked the L.A. they described as the L.A. migrant crackdown. That basically late May, Stephen Miller, he goes to a meeting at ICE and says, hey, man, the numbers, we promised to deport millions. Our numbers aren't even reaching the Biden administration. We got to get it going. And that it was Miller who said, okay, let's start broadening this out a little bit. Let's not make it quite as specific as we were before. And let's even, Well, let's spend time around 7-Eleven stores or the Home Depot, et cetera. What do you make of that story? Is it, in your view, based on what your reporters are saying, does that sound accurate? Is that part of how we've gotten to where we are at this particular point?
It very well could be, because if you know the history of Stephen Miller and you know how he's handled things in the past, it certainly tracks with his beliefs and all of that. And the story that the Journal had kind of goes to the so-called marching orders, right? That these folks had. And I was talking to a guy named John Sandweg, who I think is a very, very reasonable guy. He was the ICE director for a short amount of time when Obama was president, but he really looks back tries to look at both sides. And his view on that, he was on the show last night, is like, as soon as those if those directives came out, whether it's just, hey, go to Home Depot and you'll find people there, day laborers and the like, and this is a place. But as soon as directives came out that said that you have to make X amount of arrests per day, like it was like 3,000 or whatever it was, that, he said, made this, what we're watching, inevitable. In other words, he said as soon as that happened, there just was no way to get to those numbers without doing something that was going to provoke some sort of unrest. Now, a lot of people say, well, these people are here illegally anyway, but remember when Trump came in and the administration came in, whether it was Tom Homan or Stephen Miller, the president himself, a lot of the conversation at the time was, we're going to go after the worst of the worst, people who are criminals and that kind of thing. And many people saw this next step, however it actually came about, as going beyond that. And Sandweg's point was, you're just making a rough situation, not excusing behavior like, throwing a rock at a federal officer, but you're making you're provoking a situation that's inevitably going to come to fruition, whether you want it to or not. I think that's probably fair.
Polls are funky, and as I don't have to tell you, and I thought there was a stretch of time that indicated that the general population was not all that particularly excited with some of the immigration work at the border, but internally inside the country. Yet, a couple of people have texted me today when I've gotten to the subject, say, wait a minute, you haven't seen the latest ones, and the latest ones indicate that a surprising number of people are okay, even with the way the approach has seemingly changed. Have you reported on any of the poll numbers? Do they tell us anything, or is it pretty hard to follow them?
Well, I think on the general, on general issues, Trump's best issue, although it's not as strong as it was during the campaign, I don't believe, maybe the numbers have gone up to a similar level, has been immigration, right? Broadly speaking, you say, hey, what issue is he handling the best? His numbers on the economy with the trade war had come down. We'll see how that goes with everything with China. What stood out to us today, and we used this on the show, there was polling specifically on the use and the deployment of the military, and that wasn't as positive. In other words, there were a number of people who said, yeah, we agree with the president in terms of what he wants to do, the goals of what he wants to accomplish when it comes to immigration, but the how we're not so sure about. And he was underwater, as they say. In other words, there was more disapproval than approval on use of the military. It's something that, maybe people's minds change over time, or they'll watch how things happen in California, or if it happens in other cities or states. But it's just something people are not comfortable with in this country. It's not something that we're used to seeing, the use of uniformed members of the military patrolling American streets. We're seeing, we've seen the National Guard many times called in to help with disasters and things like that. But in this particular function, that makes people uncomfortable, even if, which is what I thought was interesting about the numbers, even if some of these people agree with the president's goals, they are concerned about that part, the how.
Two last quick items for you, and I really appreciate the time. One is, and this is probably an impossible question to answer, is there any sense from the reporters on the scene that you have that things are, calming relatively speaking, or that we're still headed, that at any point one incident can blow this thing up, at least as it pertains specifically to California, maybe elsewhere as well? That means there can really be no relaxation when it comes to whether we're going to see the peace.
That's always the way it is in these situations. Like, for example, earlier today we had a reporter, I mentioned Alex, he was on the scene and they had a bunch of religious people, some of them in collars, reverends, others were nuns, I believe, and they were standing around praying and laying flowers, and it was just the most peaceful moment you could ever imagine. And then a few hours later we had the moment I described where the police moved in very quickly to arrest some sort of an agitator. Looting happened last night very, very late. I mean, that's just a pattern we've seen in all kinds of protests. One of the more interesting protests I ever covered in person was the start of the democracy movement in Hong Kong. I was going to China at the time to cover a different story, and the Hong Kong protests broke out, and we were there for one of the first days, and everybody said, well, this is a crazy protest. But that, again, happened late at night. People wearing masks because they were afraid of their facial recognition, the Communist Party coming in and figuring out who they were, walking around almost, just milling about in the daylight hours, and then when the night falls, someone starts it up, and next thing you know, it escalates. Tear gas comes from the police. People are throwing things, engaging with the police. So it happens all over the world. It happened in L.A. last night. So it's a long answer, but the short answer would be, yeah, it does look more peaceful today, but it doesn't mean it'll look that way, 3, 4, 5 hours from now.
My sources tell me that on Saturday you will be hosting live coverage of the Trump military parade on News Nation in Washington, D.C. We also have seen, I guess, already the quote from Trump regarding protesters, and he's not going to have any tolerance for them exactly. Do we have any sense what we're going to see or what you're going to be, I guess, moderating over on Saturday?
Well, yeah, your sources got it half right. Just to be fair, I think Leland Vittert and Anna Koyman are handling the actual parade. We're doing kind of the pregame show, our normal time,
gotcha.
6 p.m. Eastern time. I don't think the parade starts until like 6 for whatever reason, which does bring up a larger point. I saw earlier today, I was looking at a map of this that some group had put out. There's a bunch of protests scheduled for Saturday. Yep. They're calling it the No Kings. Like, we don't have a king in this country. That seems to be the idea. So it's more than just immigration. And the map of it, there were dots all over this map, not only Washington, but all kinds of cities. So, we'll see. You see how these things develop. But right now, it's not just the parade itself. It's the protests around it. And that was Trump's point. People are pointing out all kinds of irony in some of his comments, particularly when you relate them back to, what he said or didn't say or did or didn't do on January 6th. That being said, that was his point, saying that, we're going to crack down on this stuff. But it's supposed to be all over the country. We'll see. So that's an added wrinkle to the whole thing on Saturday.
Really appreciate the time, Connell. I appreciate you giving us an extended time. Hope we can do it again sometime down the road, and good luck with your coverage on Saturday. Thanks again for helping us out.
Thank you, sir. I really enjoyed it. This was fun.
Much appreciated. Thank you. Connell McShane is his name. He's the basically midday, one could say, a little past midday, I guess you could say, 2 to 5, so somewhere in between, host of News Nation Now. That's, of course, you got your CNNs, you got your MSNBCs, right? You've got your Foxes, and then you got a company that's trying to find a place, right? Find its own place. They want to believe that they are less interested in being identified as left, right, whatever. They're trying to report is what they're attempting to do. And he is one of their big-time daytime hosts, and I enjoyed very much the conversation with him. He came to you via your sources, highly recommended, and I now see why. It was, as I said, his background as a reporter is gold. I mean, he goes way back for many years with Fox Business as a news correspondent for them as well as covering business stuff, Bloomberg, etc. So
anytime you can drop, I covered that in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
That's pretty authentic.
It's a humble brag, but it's a good one.
Oh, it's a great flex.
And it fit in perfectly.
Were you ever in Hong Kong covering a protest?
No,
I wasn't.
I've never even been I've never been to Hong Kong.
Me
I don't
neither.
think, unfortunately.
I've never left North America. I don't think, unless you count the Bahamas. Are they in the North America? In the North America. Don't answer. I don't even want to know.
I think
don't do it.
Is it still named North America? Or has that been changed?
That's a great question.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, how to get 30, how to get 20, 20, 20, how to get 20, 20, how to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold! Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
This episode is brought to you by Navy Federal Credit Union. Navy Federal can help you find and finance the right vehicle with ease. And this summer, you're in the driver's seat with savings. You can get a $250 bonus when you buy your next car through Navy Federal's car buying service, powered by TrueCar and financed with Navy Federal. With this tool, you can find the vehicle that's right for you as you search through inventory and compare models. And you could get an amazing rate when you finance with Navy Federal. Navy Federal strives to support all active duty, veterans, and their families to achieve their personal and financial goals. And this partnership with TrueCar is one of the many tools Navy Federal uses to help its members. Make your plan with Navy Federal and TrueCar today. Navy Federal Credit Union. To qualify for the $250 bonus, car purchase and financing must be completed by September 2nd, 2025. Terms and conditions apply and are available at NavyFederal.org/TrueCar. Credit and collateral subject to approval. Navy Federal is insured by NCUA.
That's a great question. How about 1 week from tonight? James Taylor live in concert with his all-star band. They take the stage at the XL Energy Center. June 17th, like I said, you can enter for your chance to win a pair of tickets to this incredible show at KFAN.com, keyword contest.
Disappointed listener. That's probably not bad percentage via the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line. It is what it is, 64686. It's a cross-section, but not maybe a scientific cross-section of listenership and or viewership, although we're not generally being viewed, right? We're usually being listened to.
We're streamed quarterly.
Quarterly, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Online.
Oh. What does that mean, streamed quarterly?
Well, we can watch us on KFAN.com/watch.
Oh, we can?
About once a quarter.
Once a quarter.
They fire it up. It was just a meaningless cheap shot.
4 times a year?
Yeah.
Okay. Why don't you ever have a guest on that disagrees with your point of view? Every political guest you have on agrees with your political point of view. Have one that doesn't agree with you. Well, first of all, he wasn't a political guest. He was an anchor and a former reporter for Fox Business. And I'd never spoken to him before. He came highly recommended. I mentioned to Guardsy this morning. We got some good contacts with News Nation. Might there be a reporter out in the field who we could get on just to give us an overview? And what came back from your sources was, I want to try this guy who is an anchor, who's a former reporter, but he's talking to reporters.
Connell McShane is the guy.
Connell McShane.
For your show.
And so I didn't find him particularly political. I think he was trying to do what I think good anchors do, which is cover the waterfront. Occasionally fact check when at all possible. So I don't, and I didn't even think there was that. Most of what I asked was all that controversial in that regard. It was more, what are we hearing on the ground? What are we seeing? How might it go from this point forward? What kind of contact has there been between the governor and the president, etc.? And that's at least the intent here. Now, it does get, here's where it gets tricky, and we talked a little bit about this. Your guy, who's the Secretary of Defense?
Pete Hegseth?
Pete Hegseth testified today and had kind of some tense verbal moments with Betty McCollum, I believe, and also of Minnesota, if I'm not mistaken, correct? And so in the back and forth, in not answering one of her questions, Hegseth went back to what took place in Minneapolis post George Floyd regarding the delinquents of the National Guard being dispatched and put into position where it could help to bring things under control. I'm not going to change my stance now, several years after that took place. There was a series of ham-handed decisions involving the mayor and involving the governor. We can debate and argue to this day about whose responsibility you lean towards in that regard. Remember, there was all kinds of paperwork that was flying back and forth at the time.
Yes.
Both individuals, frankly, trying to throw the other one under the bus, if you recall, because in the end,
big time,
it's all about political survival. Right?
Yes.
But the fact is, somebody or some buddies, Hegseth ain't wrong, dropped the ball on that occasion. And that's where it gets tricky here regarding the call for the National Guard in California. Not the Marines, which make I've not yet, to this moment, heard any legitimate comeback or need to call in the Marines. But when it comes to the National Guard, I'll ask it again the same way I did our guest. Did the governor of California, did he not have interest in National Guard because he didn't think there was a real need, or was it because Trump was being so aggressive about it, and whatever Trump likes, he can't go along with? Because there's always the question of, well, it sure doesn't look like the Guard was needed yet, but the same thing could have been said at one point in Minnesota, in Minneapolis. There's a tipping point. And that's the unknown part of this, that part of the idea of National Guard display is proactivity, to be proactive, to be prepared if things get more pear-shaped, and to be able to have your forces in place quickly. Because if you recall, I remember we all talked about this at the time with the reporters. It was, well, you can't just snap your fingers and say, right, National Guard's going to be there in 15 minutes.
It's not like an on-call doctor.
No, there's a deployment issues, where you're going to go, what the mission is. That was another big question. What do you want us to do exactly? Mm-hmm. And there was at least one significant day delay, even after the governor said, we're in charge now, if you recall. There was still a delay of a day that led to more violence taking place. So I think there can be a reasonable discussion about that. How do you know whether you're going to need them to put them in place? Were there enough police when the governor said we can handle it? Maybe that's true. To me, that's the question that is almost unanswerable, should be reported on, and should be, we talk about following the story. I think there's room for discussion on that issue. I don't think there's any room for discussion on the Marine deployment, in my view, none whatsoever. It's a bad move. It's a purposeful move. And, he's now the president. He throws this stuff out and doesn't always mean it. We know that, but that doesn't mean we can't rip it, because he's still declaring it out loud. And the latest was on protests at the military parade. The self-flagellation parade.
The military parade.
What are we going to, no, they're not going to be the protest. I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but he's, again, on the basis of the quote, basically said, they'll be met with significant, was it force? What's the word? You can find the quote. And so that, to me, takes the story to a whole nother level. But I think I don't know that we're ever going to know the question. Maybe there was no need. It may well have been an overreaction, but there's that question of there was an underreaction here. Right? Now, I get the distinction. The distinction is, best case scenario, historically, the chain of command is, well, in the case of Minneapolis, the mayor goes to the governor, right? And then the governor makes the move, or the governor then can get the president involved, or the president calls and says, hey, governor, you need help here on this stuff? Can we help you in that regard? And the governor says, yes, we do need the help. And obviously in California, they didn't ask for the help. So that's the question that comes up. Is this just an attempt to strong arm us, to intimidate us? And is there legitimate reason to be concerned that in escalating it to that extent, you end up actually making it more likely there's going to be trouble? The tensions are going to bubble over into more acts of violence as well. Those are all, I think, fair discussions we can have. But the problem, that's where it gets tricky regarding, how prepared you want to be or need to be at the point where, well, maybe it hasn't reached a point where there's a need for National Guard yet, but might there be? And then should that process have already been started? The Marines thing is unprecedented. And I think in the case of the president, unilaterally, basically nationalizing the National Guard troops, first time I think that's happened in, I want to say, like 65 years without a governor's approval, shall I say. That's what made it so unusual.
If there's any protester that wants to come out, they will be met with very big force. I haven't even heard about a protest, but, this is people that hate our country, but they will be met with very heavy force.
Heavy force. So we don't know what that means, but It's I wouldn't call it conciliatory language, but that's what do we expect? Did we expect anything different?
I never do. No,
At
sir.
this point? No.
You need another break here, by the way.
Yeah, I'm aware. I was just looking at I need to know what this means. If Biden or Obama did this, you would have no issue with it whatsoever. You just dislike Trump so much that he can't do anything right, and everything he does, you have to be mad at. What did we just talk about? What I just got done saying is on the issue of National Guard implementation, it's tricky. I even asked, is the reason that people in California didn't want it because they didn't need it, or was it because Trump was demanding it? That's referring to the inability sometimes to look past your bad feelings regarding that individual leader. How much clearer can I be in raising that question? You 763 guy, you don't want to listen. You've decided that in this case represent in your mind TDS, and so you don't even you're so anxious to confirm that bias that you don't even listen to the question that I just raised on the National Guard part. By the way, the fact is Biden and Obama have never done this, though. When it comes to the Marines, they've never done this. So to say if they had, you'd have no issue with it, this has not happened in the country it hasn't happened at all in the case of Marines that I'm aware of, but in this kind of situation. But in terms of just overriding a governor's lack of interest, that's the first time it has happened in 65 years. But your sorry, it doesn't wash because it hasn't happened in the case of both. And that doesn't mean either one of those individuals are not rippable or that they're above.
This episode is brought to you by Navy Federal Credit Union. Navy Federal can help you find and finance the right vehicle with ease. And this summer, you're in the driver's seat with savings. You can get a $250 bonus when you buy your next car through Navy Federal's car buying service, powered by TrueCar and financed with Navy Federal. With this tool, you can find the vehicle that's right for you as you search through inventory and compare models. And you could get an amazing rate when you finance with Navy Federal. Navy Federal strives to support all active duty, veterans, and their families to achieve their personal and financial goals. And this partnership with TrueCar is one of the many tools Navy Federal uses to help its members. Make your plan with Navy Federal and TrueCar today. Navy Federal Credit Union. To qualify for the $250 bonus, car purchase and financing must be completed by September 2nd, 2025. Terms and conditions apply and are available at NavyFederal.org/TrueCar. Credit and collateral subject to approval. Navy Federal is insured by NCUA.
Criticism. And then there is this pretty much out of nowhere from much earlier in the program, and maybe I can clear the decks on this particular issue for the second time minimum on this show. We talked about this story extensively. What's today, Tuesday? I want to say might have been midweek last week or perhaps Thursday. 952 guy Mark describes himself as a longtime fan. We appreciate the loyalty. I think it is imperative that you touch on girls' state softball, the girls' state softball travesty that took place last week. Champlain Park won the tournament easily by using a transgender pitcher who started each game and made short work of each team of girls. He describes this as absurd. I had a text yesterday from someone saying you guys are afraid to talk about it. I don't know why you're afraid to talk about it. We have talked about it. Now, at that point, they hadn't won the whole thing. I think they were 2 victories short. Have no difficulty revisiting it. I believe there is a absolutely legitimate question of fairness. And when it plays out that that individual leads that team to win the whole thing, I've said many times before, I'll say again, we should be having this conversation far more readily and publicly than we do right now. Because do you agree with me? I even think in this town, from a media standpoint, there's reluctance.
Yes.
To talk about it.
Yeah.
And look, if you're being reluctant to talk about it because you think there's nothing to it, you think that this pitcher has every right to be out there and I'm not going to participate in this, I'll respect that. I have no problem with that. But my gut tells me that a lot of people just are afraid to go down the road. And that fear doesn't serve any purpose. As we said, yes, I think there is an elementary issue of fairness that is raised by this particular series of performances. And I've made it clear I'm not interested in any way, shape, or form at demonizing the individual involved. Mm-hmm. I don't want to get near that. I don't want to have anything to do with that. For me, the discussion, though, that doesn't mean there can't be, because on that basis, there will never be a discussion. The discussion should be about policy. How do we feel about policy? How do we come to the direction that the Minnesota State High School League is gone with? And we have seen, speaking of polls, endless polls indicating, I think, upwards of between 70 and 80% across the country. If you describe that particular circumstance, they would say that's unfair to the other participants. That no one wants to exclude, but we have conflicting, quote-unquote, rights involved here. And that's why, one of the comebacks I get all the time is, well, this is such a small percentage. Why are you even going there? Well, the small percentage was involved in this case in winning the state high school tournament in softball. So it doesn't matter how the small the percentage is. If that's part of what takes place, there's a news element to that as far as I'm concerned. So I'll just say to the texter, if he's still listening, yes, I think it's a problem. My problem is I don't know what the answer is exactly.
That's why people are hesitant to talk about it, because I don't think anybody knows. We're all struggling with the answer, like we talked about last week. What is fair for everybody involved? What is fair in terms of making sure everybody can participate at some level? It's a difficult conversation, one that we always talk about. But
I actually think there are too many people who are now even afraid to acknowledge that every piece of research we have confirms what the eye test would confirm. That a transgender pitcher pitching in a girls' tournament has an advantage built into her sex at birth. But we're almost in the effort to be careful that no one gets discriminated against. It's almost like, well, is that really true? Do we know that? And the comeback that I've heard most recently is, who's the world-class 25-time Olympic swimmer, U.S. swimmer?
Katie Ledecky?
No, on the men's side.
Oh, Michael Phelps?
Michael Phelps. Have you heard this example? Well, if you look at Phelps' body, the advantage that his body gives him compared to other male athletes,
well, that's stupid,
is dramatic. What's the difference? It's fundamentally flawed logic, but that's an example to me of how hard we're trying to work to pretend that the questions here are legit, and that, as we said before, there are many liberal women who have said, well, we're ignoring this, but we're ignoring this at our own peril. And it's creating resentment. And there shouldn't be resentment against the individual participating who is playing by the rules in the state of Minnesota, for example. But that's why we should be able to at least have greater conversations about it, and even take another look at the policy. And when it involves, to me, In every story that is written on that run, this should have been part of the conversation. It wasn't. It wasn't. And I don't think I think that's intellectually dishonest wherever you are on that particular issue. Where it gets funky again is you're talking about a minor, and obviously you're trying to avoid names, although the fact is in the internet age, is it a distinction without a difference? I don't know. It's important for me, again, to not make it about any of the individual participants, because I think that weakens your case and makes it more likely that really what is behind what you're pretending your outrage is about is more that you have a problem with transgenders, period. And there is an element of the population that undoubtedly falls into that classification. Be foolish to deny it, but because those individuals exist, I still don't think that means we shouldn't be able to have at least some of this conversation. One other text. Dan, I think we need a new term. We have TDS, Trump Derangement Syndrome. How about TZS, Trump Zealot Syndrome? Definition: the inability to objectively look at any criticism or objection of an action or policy of President Trump. Common symptoms: eagerness to believe and support anything Trump says, immediate labeling of anyone who even questions a point or policy that is viewed as negative as on Trump as having TDS. I strongly lean right and can't stand Trump and the way his supporters are unable to have an open discussion on the merits of an issue. To me, they are the same as the far left that they demonize. Pretty good text, I would say.
TZS.
TZS, Trump Zealot Syndrome.
But when we bring up TZS, we'll be accused of having TDS.
That's the box.
And we're just on a hamster wheel.
That's it. We just go.
Nonsense.
It's just going to go round and round and round, and where the hamster wheel stops, nobody.
This episode is brought to you by Navy Federal Credit Union. Navy Federal can help you find and finance the right vehicle with ease. And this summer, you're in the driver's seat with savings. You can get a $250 bonus when you buy your next car through Navy Federal's car buying service, powered by TrueCar and financed with Navy Federal. With this tool, you can find the vehicle that's right for you as you search through inventory and compare models. And you could get an amazing rate when you finance with Navy Federal. Navy Federal strives to support all active duty, veterans, and their families to achieve their personal and financial goals. And this partnership with TrueCar is one of the many tools Navy Federal uses to help its members. Make your plan with Navy Federal and TrueCar today. Navy Federal Credit Union. To qualify for the $250 bonus, car purchase and financing must be completed by September 2nd, 2025. Terms and conditions apply and are available at NavyFederal.org/TrueCar. Credit and collateral subject to approval. Navy Federal is insured by NCUA.
Head back to the 50s at the Minnesota Street Rod Association event June 20th through the 22nd at the Minnesota State Fairgrounds. Enjoy the classic car marketplace, T6 flyover, the great race, cruise and art, craft fair, and so much more. Head over to our contest page for your shot at tickets, KFAN.com, keyword contests.
The old saying, I don't remember what Southerner spoke it first. The South shall rise again. It's people who still haven't gotten over the Civil War.
Right.
I wonder who first said it. Will you look that up? The South shall rise again. And as you do, whoever said it might, if they're still alive, and I doubt that they are, might feel some vindication. Today's Tuesday, right? Yeah.
Yes, June 10th.
Today, your guy, Donald J. Trump, said he is restoring the name of Fort Robert E. Lee and other current or former military installations named after soldiers that led the Confederacy during the Civil War. I don't even know. I mean, is it worth even rising to debate? Is this? I mean, I don't know that it is. I'm looking for the quote.
Jefferson Davis kind of gets credit for it.
Okay. He was the president of the Confederacy, wasn't he, for a while, Jeff Davis?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, his friends called him Jeff.
Yeah. So, in any case, there was a quote. Now I can't find it. Where he talked about all the winning. He said there was a lot of winning that they did. But didn't the South lose, ultimately?
They did, yes.
Oh, we won a lot of battles out of those forts.
Scored last?
He continued. I'm superstitious. I like to keep it going right. So there's your reason. So now I'm waiting for the first text to come in that says, this is why I voted for Donald J. Trump, to make sure those names were changed. And look, we can argue about what to do with monuments or how far back you go to sort of mask the history of the country. But who does this? Well, I guess I know who this resonates with, sadly. It unfortunately does. You know, why do they have to make all those changes? The ultimate, so he's aligning himself with the ultimate insurrectionist, Robert E. Lee and Jeff Davis. So congratulations.
While he awaits trial for treason.
He's too busy, right? That's the thing about Trump. All the California stuff's going on, but there's always, every day there are at least 4 or 5 other stories he can still get us involved in to try to distract us, correct?
I don't know what website I'm looking at, but it looks pretty
legit?
good. Yeah, it's legit.
Is it too legit to quit?
But they have a document from October 9th, 1868.
Oh, why bother?
While he awaits trial for treason, Davis writes a close friend lamenting the radical rule of the Republicans in the state of the Southland. The expression, the South shall rise again, is one that everyone has heard, not only in the southern states, but throughout the entire nation. And apparently it was in part of this letter. Jefferson Davis hopes the oppressed South shall rise again. Some songs have been written about it, too.
There's no question about that. Looks like some... By the way, any big controversies out of the first day of mandatory minicamp?
I have, honestly, I haven't seen anything come out of it, besides what we talked about earlier, that Christian Darrisaw allegedly took part in some.
Let's face it, all anybody wants to care about is how J-Mac looked flinging the football, right?
Spinning it.
Seriously, isn't that what it is?
Yeah.
That's what we're waiting for. And to see whether a certain former Packers cornerback might show up.
Jair Alexander.
Any new steam on him?
Not that I've seen. But it's a popular name. Who needs depth or who needs corners?
Who was the veteran guy we had a year ago? Gilmore.
Stephon Gilmore.
He's available right now. He's older by, I think, 6 years. And he kind of... Didn't he get hurt late? I think he got hurt late in the season. I mean, I think he was pretty functional, right? But he got hurt late.
Didn't he end the Jets game with an interception? The Aaron Rodgers game?
Is that right? Yeah, I think you're right.
If I remember right.
You might be right about that. I'm scrolling because trying to buy time because I thought I did read a Vikings related nugget, but of course now I can't find the darn thing. So if it comes to me, I'm sure we'll be able to review it with Ben on Friday, right?
Yes, he'll be locked in.
Or is he even bothering to cover it? Do you see Mick Jagger has weighed in on the loss of Sly Stone?
I did not, no.
Thanks for the inspirational music, Sly. I mean, I wanted a little bit more from Mick. A little bit more effort than that. You know what I'm saying? Was that expecting too much? I mean, I know he's not necessarily a wordsmith, but
he's keeping it simple.
I don't know.
To the point.
I was looking for something a little bit more profound. And I mean, it's true, I guess, and maybe, like you said, keeping it simple is better. Yeah, I can't find the Vikings nugget. I thought I did find one interesting development at least. Oh, here's a look at that throw.
J-Mac?
Hold on, let me see. I got to play it again. Rolling right. Well, who threw it? Well, the camera work is it's so tough you can't see.
Sam Howell?
What's J-Mac's number?
Oh man, isn't he 9?
Then it was him. Yeah. 9-3.
Addison,
who that might be his last catch until he gets suspended. Yeah, but you could. It looked. You know what? It was not a bullet throw. It was. He kind of had to wait for the ball. I'm not sure if I were the Vikings, I'd use that as the highlight. Oh, here's a Seifert item from today. Josh Metellus' contract expires after this season. Extension talks are underway, but in OTAs and now day one of minicamp, but he has not participated in 7-on-7 drills. He has done 11-on-11s, which are at a much slower pace. Talked today via KSTP Sports. Josh Metellus. He's the monster back. I think that's the position. That's what he should call his position.
Yes.
Didn't we talk to him about that?
You did it,
Josh
Shields.
Metellus. Maybe that was the nugget I was working for. Now, fans can't go to minicamp, correct?
They cannot. No.
But media, I think it's wide open, the whole thing, right?
I haven't been to a minicamp.
Told us yesterday.
It probably is.
Yeah.
I haven't been to a minicamp, I want to say, since 2006. That's the last time I remember being at a Vikings minicamp.
Did you see, by the way, the reporter? There may have been more than one. I'm sure we'll get to it with Kessler tomorrow because he's very vigilant, rightly so, on this issue. There was an Aussie reporter who got nailed with one of those pepper ball bullets.
I did see that.
You see that?
Yes. It was interesting because the camera panned right to the officers when that officer fired on her.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah,
it was crazy.
It was. I know. I don't understand what exactly that. What's that supposed to accomplish? I'm not exactly sure.
Shooting a reporter with a pellet gun?
Yeah, like, okay, I guess I can do it, so I might as well just go ahead and do it.
Stupid.
Yeah. Do we have any demonstrations planned here this weekend or anytime soon? Have we had, because California's been the epicenter, right, because of the raids out there, but I saw a little bit of tension in Dallas either yesterday or the night before. Might have been the night before.
There's a nice protest in New York as well now.
In New York? Okay, the Big Apple.
That our guy Connell McShane was also covering a little bit.
Okay.
I don't know about here for the weekend. But like he told us, they're planned for all over the country, so you'd have to imagine Minneapolis is probably going to be involved. We're not sitting that one out.
I wouldn't think. Then there's what's going to take place at so the military parade is Saturday?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Although Trump said Sunday, I think, yesterday or today.
He did?
Yeah.
So he's confused? Or is that, I think it's Saturday. Pretty sure.
It's Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jets has an injured finger. Is that true?
I hadn't heard that.
I don't see that in any reporting. Is he going to be okay?
By the season? Not if he plays flag football in the Olympics.
Dan, I would have changed my vote to Trump if I knew he was such a history and geography buff. Changing the Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America is the legacy stuff his family can be proud of. Yeah, there's no question about that. I tell you what.
How quickly will that be changed back? After he wins his third term.
Well, I was going to say, what do you mean? You're assuming he's going to leave office?
2032?
You sure he's going to leave?
No, that's why I'm giving it 2032.
Okay. Oh, by the way, it is worth noting Josh Oliver, the blocking tight end extraordinaire, who actually has caught a few passes for us.
Yeah.
Turns out he had a little bit more ability with his hands than we thought. Signed a 3-year contract extension, doubling down on we want to continue to maintain and improve the running game.
We're going to run it.
Being greater physicality, correct?
That's what they tell us.
Isn't it about physicality?
It's about who can win at the line of scrimmage. That's what free agency has been about. Yeah. That's what our first-round draft pick was about, and Josh Oliver is a part of that.
All right, let's come back, wrap up today's program, remind you what we might have coming up tomorrow as well.
This episode is brought to you by Navy Federal Credit Union. Navy Federal can help you find and finance the right vehicle with ease. And this summer, you're in the driver's seat with savings. You can get a $250 bonus when you buy your next car through Navy Federal's car buying service, powered by TrueCar and financed with Navy Federal. With this tool, you can find the vehicle that's right for you as you search through inventory and compare models. And you could get an amazing rate when you finance with Navy Federal. Navy Federal strives to support all active duty, veterans, and their families to achieve their personal and financial goals. And this partnership with TrueCar is one of the many tools Navy Federal uses to help its members. Make your plan with Navy Federal and TrueCar today. Navy Federal Credit Union. To qualify for the $250 bonus, car purchase and financing must be completed by September 2nd, 2025. Terms and conditions apply and are available at NavyFederal.org/TrueCar. Credit and collateral subject to approval. Navy Federal is insured by NCUA.
Show Wrap is presented by American Pressure, commercial-grade pressure washer since 1975.
It's the bumper-to-bumper Show Wrap.
What's the best way to describe today's segment with Lou Nanny? It was basically an Andrew Zimmern style food in foreign places show. In this case, Italy. Yes. And I enjoyed every minute of it, actually. Louis was good. He eventually did get to hockey. We did get to the Stanley Cup Finals as well. Or final, as it's supposed to be called. Did you know that? You're not supposed to call it finals.
I knew that, and it bothers me how much time I spend thinking about that to make sure I get it right.
Unbelievable. I'm not going to worry about it anymore. Louis was early today because he's in Italy. Time difference.
I looked at the hotel he was at, by the way.
Pretty opulent.
Oh, my God.
Was it Nico? It was in the Grand Hotel?
The Grand Hotel. And there's like 5 hotels within the Grand Hotel, and he's at the grandest of the grand.
Does that shock you?
No, it doesn't. Yeah. And it's on a cliff.
Naturally.
Literally, where you just look at this big cliff and this rock, and the balconies go right over the water. It's insane.
Connell McShane joined to the program. He's a new guest on the show. I hope we can have him on again. He's an anchor, a daytime anchor, 2 to 5 Central on News Nation. I think the show is called News Nation now, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Between 2 and 5 Central. And we got a good overview on what he has been covering as anchor with reporters, interviews, newsmaker interviews that he's done regarding California, and a couple of other stories. And that was between 5 and 5:30 this evening. We did talk esoteric sports today, tennis and soccer. Tennis to the good. Great finishes to the French Open on both the women's side, but especially, most notably, the comeback on the men's side. And then on the other side of the ledger, really, the doom and gloom forecasts regarding U.S. men's soccer now a year removed, 365 days removed from the start of the World Cup in 2026. And a lot of theories were advanced as to why we can't seem to gain much momentum on the men's side of the discussion. We did briefly get back to the question regarding transgender participation in women's sports. As I said, the key thing to me on this, as complicated as it is can anybody deny that in the case of the softball tournament, that a balance of power was changed. The parameters of the competition was changed. Now, can you prove it? No, but it's fairly apparent that was in part what took place in the case of a pitcher pitching, was it 21 scoreless innings? I think it was 21 scoreless innings.
Sounds right.
Not mistaken. It was even more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's going back to sections too.
An element, that's fairness. There is a question of fairness. Now, how you accommodate that with also trying to protect this individual from being demonized, which she should not be, that's what makes this so complicated. But anything that changes the parameters of the competition, we should be able to talk about it if the competition matters. We're keeping score. And there are a number of other individuals who then get affected by that shift in power. And I think what it breeds some of the resentment is the unwillingness to even have the discussion because we're tiptoeing. We're kind of afraid to talk about it. I hope there can be more conversation about it. Tomorrow is a Kessler day, correct? Maybe we add Mitch Lawrence tomorrow.
Why not?
Game number 3, NBA Finals,
never
correct?
Bad.
Yeah, that's never a bad pickup. And who knows what else. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Fan on Demand is right around the corner. We will talk to you tomorrow at 3 o'clock.
Well, go Twins. Thank you for the airtime, and I'll talk to you soon.